I was hoping Ann Coulter would not cancel the keynote today. I know. But you know, it's good to always be the backup, right? Lieutenant Governor. What does a lieutenant governor do? Someone once said that the principal job of lieutenant governor is to wake up every morning blurry-eyed, pick up the newspaper, go to the obituary section, you know where I'm going, and to see if the governor's name appears in it, and if not, go back to sleep. So this is kind of nice, a little bit refreshing. I feel important today, and I'm grateful. All. I'm also grateful for the speakers before me. I'm grateful in particular to Noah and AJ who invited me here. I'm grateful to the Dean for her generosity, her introduction, and her extraordinary leadership, which was demonstrable, wasn't it, by your enthusiastic thanks. And obviously she's going to be missed in this role, but I have a feeling she may be back in it one day. That's my sense. But let me pick up a little. You know, there were a couple things said by AJ and Noah and Tyrion that I thought were important to pick up on. You know, all that anxiety that Tyrion was just talking about, the anxiety and fear that so many of us are feeling at this moment in time. And I think about it in the context of those of you from California. This is not the first time for all of us out here, right? Issues of xenophobia and nativism, the fear of others. You know, it wasn't that long ago, 1994, when we were facing Prop 187, when we were facing a ballot initiative, 3 strikes, when the UC regions were rejecting affirmative action. But we were resilient. Fast forward today. Look around. Here we are in Berkeley, this remarkably diverse class, in one of the most diverse cities, in one of the most diverse regions, the Bay Area, in the most diverse state, California, in the world's most diverse democracy, the United States of America. And I'm not the first to say this. I think the world looks to all of us, looks to all of you, to see that it's possible to live together, to advance together, and prosper together across every conceivable and imaginable difference. What makes California great is that we don't tolerate our diversity. What makes us great is we celebrate our diversity. These are core values. Let's not forget that. That's the spirit of our times, right? Nations and people being torn apart in Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, because of racial, religious, and ethnic controversies. And here we are at Berkeley, in the spirit of Dr. King, right? Recognizing that we're all bound together by a web of mutuality, that we're all in this together. It's that spirit that gives me a sense of pride and optimism about not just the fate and future of your lives, but the lives of all of us in this state and in this nation and the world we're trying to build. So let me try to make a couple points and offer an admonition or two, and hopefully distill a sense of, I think, optimism in terms of where you're all going. I appreciate Neil Murray's comments and commentary about 2004 and same-sex marriage. It's interesting, I was talking to Professor Feely about it as well. He said, isn't it ironic that you're a keynote at a law school and you didn't go to law school, and you're probably best known for breaking the law? Which is, you know, technically true. You know, it was an amazing experience. I just became elected mayor of San Francisco a few weeks, and I got a call from Nancy Pelosi and Dianne Feinstein, and they said, you know, it's time to be feted. You're 35, relatively young guy. Why don't you come back to Washington, D.C., and we'll have a fancy party for you. And I had the privilege of going back there. We had that fancy party, and Nancy Pelosi at the time said, you want to stay the night? I got an extra ticket. My husband, Paul, he's not so interested, but you may be interested in taking his ticket to watch President George Bush give his State of the Union speech. I thought, what the heck? That might be interesting. I never really spent much time at the Capitol. Certainly never been to a State of the Union. I'll never forget that State of the Union. You can go back and Google it. Talking about Afghanistan and terror, I understood that. But then he got into the interesting issues of the day in 2004. You'll forget this, you were too young. Issues of abstinence, drug testing, steroid abuse. I kid you not, these are the principal tenets of his State of the Union speech. And then the crescendo, the one a lot of folks are waiting for. And now it's time for a constitutional amendment to define marriage between a man and a woman. That was the final pledge in that 2004 State of the Union speech. I remember walking out of the speech a little bit dejected, not necessarily inspired, but there were two people, I kid you not, next to me as I was getting my cell phone, and everyone's getting their pagers and cell phones back in the day. And they leaned over, I'll never forget. This woman said, boy, I just was so inspired. Weren't you, honey, by that speech? Said, I'm so sick, she said this, of that homosexual agenda. And I sat there and I had the urge to introduce myself as the mayor of San Francisco. I didn't do it. I didn't do it, but literally it was that moment that I decided not to go back to Nancy's office to download about the speech, but to walk out the opposite direction and to call my chief of staff and say, did you hear that speech? We need to do something about it. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, I don't know, but let's figure it out. I made it back the next day and had the privilege of being there with Kate Kendall and NCLR and legal team at ACLU. A lot of folks that said, you know what? Let's just not send out a press release. Let's put a human face on the issue of discrimination. Let's see if we can get Phyllis Lyon and Del Martin, a couple that some of you know that at the time had been together 50 years. They were the physical manifestation of what marriage should be about: faith, love, devotion, a cause to each other that's just extraordinary over half a century. And they agreed to be that couple, to put that human face, to put a story and a narrative behind the issue of discrimination at the time in 2004. Now the word got out. I'll be brief here and wrap this up, but the word got out that we might be doing this, and all these fancy groups, these lawyers from all across the country descended on San Francisco, and they were about to go in to get an injunction, a TRO. And then I realized, it's good to be mayor. I don't have to wait till 9 o'clock to open up City Hall. I can open up at 8. And I invited Phyllis and Del, said, you got to get in early. Courts across the street open up at 9. At 9:01, we may not be able to do this. Let's get on in. And they did, down at the county clerk's office. And Phyllis and Del said those two magical words that for so many of us we take for granted: I do. And about an hour later, we waited with bated breath for the court to make a decision. That court, represented by Judge James Warren, a name you may be familiar with, or at least his grandfather, Earl Warren. And if you're not, you are not getting your degree in a moment. How ironic and interesting. 2004, 50 years since Brown versus Board of Education. His grandson said there's no irreparable harm being done. No temporary restraining order. As a consequence, all of a sudden we had a decision to make. Do we keep going? Because there were other couples said, wait, we've been together 30 years. Can we get married? And we decided to move forward. Lo and behold, they judge shopped. They tried every legal angle. And for a month, we called the Winter of Love. 4,036 couples from 46 states and 6 countries came to live their lives out loud in San Francisco. Okay. Now, I say all that to make a couple points and to connect some dots. I was listening to the other speakers. Jerry mentioned loving versus the state of Virginia. The year of my birth. Remember, blacks could not marry whites in the United States of America. Forget same-sex couples. in 1967. It took the courage of Richard Loving and Mildred Jeter. Richard, by the way, who was sentenced to 1 year in prison. Do you remember this? 1 year in prison. And the judge at the time, I can say this as a son of an appellate court judge, the judge said to Richard, in sentencing him to 1 year in prison for having the audacity to say those two words, I do, he said, God, sir. God put different races on different continents for a reason. God never wanted the races to mix. Literally, I'm paraphrasing what the judge said. It's not lost on me, that sentence. Don't tweet that, please. But it was a literal paraphrase of the judge's decision. It's a remarkable thing. But here's my long-winded point. Those changes occurred because people had the courage to step up and step in. Phyllis and Dell did not have any formal authority. Richard Loving, Mildred Jeter didn't have any formal authority. But they decided to fight. They decided to put their lives on the line and step up and step in. And that's my point to all of you. You don't need to be something to do something. We get so caught up in titles, I get it. You're getting one today. We get so caught up, don't we, in the guy or gal on the white horse going to come save the day. But you think about change, the history of change in this world. Nonviolent change almost universally comes from the bottom, not the top. And it most often comes from the least among us. It's true. You think about Mandela, you think about that March on Washington, Dr. King, you think of guys like Havel and Gandhi. In fact, someone told me the other day, you know what Gandhi, King, Havel, and Mandela have in common at the peak of their influence? Jail time. Right? But all of them exercised their moral authority. They didn't wait to be something, to do something. On that March on Washington, we weren't celebrating former President Martin Luther King. Gandhi never became prime minister. We think about Mandela's life as a life of liberation, not necessarily 4 years of governing. And you can ask Havel himself, though he's not around, he wrote a lot about this. He talked about that Velvet Revolution. He talked about when he became president of Czechoslovakia, it de-geniused him. He lost a little of his moral voice. He talked about the constraints of office. It's not about formal authority. It's your job to step up and step in. You have agency. You can shape the future. Don't wait around for other people to do that. That's the spirit of these times. That's the spirit of what Terry was just talking. That anxiety needs to be matched with courage. Sarge Shriver, my hero, famously talked about the politics of fear and the politics of life and the politics of death. The politics of death are about the status quo, about bureaucracy, about routine, about rules. The politics of life are about initiative, creativity, and as he loved to say, dash and daring. Think about that. You have agency. You have the ability to manifest change. The future is not something to experience. It's an achievement. You've got to make it so. It's inside of you. It's not in front of you. Take initiative. Be bold. Live a life of purpose and meaning. And it goes back to exactly what Rodrigo was saying. I love that. He talked about that, right? He said, who are you? Find out your why. Discover it. Are you here to stand up for ideals? Are you here to strike out against injustice? Why do you exist? Seriously. Because there'll come a point in life when you look back and it may be too damn late. Now is the time. At this hinge moment in your life. What the hell am I doing here? Why do I matter? Why do I exist? And so I offer that as a point of consideration. Don't get too consumed about waiting to be that person, to be that fancy clerk, to be that judge, to be that corporate lawyer, to be that politician. Don't wait to step up and step in. And I'll close with a wonderful quote from one of the great jurists of our time who served till he was 93 years old, Oliver Wendell Holmes, who said his life is action and passion. It's required of all of us to share the action and passion of our time at peril of being judged not to have lived. What he was saying is each of us will be judged, but more important than anything else, ultimately judge ourselves to the extent we contribute to the life of our city, our nation, and that world that we're trying to build. African proverb made this final point. I'll make this final point that is so important in life. If you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I'll just make this point. You know, we're living in a world where some have made this point in the past, where our wisdom is way too limited, our life is way too short to win fleeting victories at other people's expenses. And this is my last point to you. We all must triumph together. And if we do, I promise you this, the best is yet to come. Thank you guys very much.